Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am not in my office, and I am flanked by two gentlemen, which is awesome. I am in Las Vegas for IMEX, which is the world's largest industry trade show for the meetings and events industry. And I'm going to be here live every single day this week. But today is World Food Day, which is recognized by the UN or designed by the UN. And the focus is on water. And so I am here with Michael Gulich, who is the Vice President of Sustainability for MGM Resorts International. And then Eric Green, who is Director of Sustainability. Eric Green. I just put your last name with your company name. Eric Wallinger from MeetGreen, who is the Director of Sustainability for MeetGreen, which is a event planning consulting firm for sustainable events, right?
And I like that name too.
Okay. Did I mess it all up again?
No.
Okay.
I like Eric Green.
Okay, Eric. Okay. So for today's show, I really wanted to talk about water because that's the UN's focus for World Health Day today, and everywhere. I actually was walking to the hotel today, and I noticed that the fountains out front are not running. There's just water in them, but they're not running. So, and we're in the desert. We're in Las Vegas in the desert. So can we talk about water and events? And we were talking just before the show started that it's not necessarily just about the water glasses preset on the table. There's a lot more water that we don't see in the world, in our events. So, but actually, before we get there, will you tell them what you do as the Direct Vice President of Sustainability for MGM?
So I have a small but mighty team who is focused on our environmental impact, our environmental footprint.
And that's for all the resorts worldwide?
Correct.
And how many is that?
That is about 30 resorts worldwide.
Okay. All right. I've been to the ones here on the Strip and then in DC.
Primarily focused in Las Vegas. Our center of gravity is here, but we have 7 regional properties throughout the U.S. and then 2 in China, and we're in the process of building 1 in Japan.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And Eric, what about MeetGreen?
Yeah. So we are a supplier, for example, of IMEX, a consulting agency that we fill in the gap where, for example, Michael's team might end. Like we work closely with your team. What a client might have goals that they would like a report, on-site presence, kind of running meetings and setting a green plan for their team. And so we fill in that role for the event. And so we do work very closely and in synergy with MGM, for example, on the IMEX.
Okay, awesome. And you've had that relationship with IMEX for
over a decade.
Wow. Okay, awesome. And there's lots of things that we will see at IMEX this week that implement what you guys are doing sustainability wise. Okay. So one of the things that when I sent questions in advance, I had all these lofty questions, and Eric's like, Tracy, meeting planners really can't control water at their meetings. What does that mean? Tell me what that means and why can't we control water?
Yeah, well,
or a lot of the water usage.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll suss out a little bit about what are our expectations and what does it look like in reality. And so on one level, if we are getting environmental footprint data for our event, which is one of the great best practices, it's great to get those numbers, and you will see your consumption.
Okay.
And
is that like the consumption of mine in my hotel room?
At MGM Resorts, you'll get both.
Okay.
It's broken out by hotel and event space.
Wow.
But what's tricky is that of that number, your ability to influence that is kind of in a gray area. Because as I understand it, and Michael, you might know more, something like 70% of many venues' water is through their HVAC system. And so that goes up or down based
on how hot it is.
Yeah. And so that's a hydronic system, water flowing through pipes that's boiled or chilled through a fan box.
Right.
And so it's weird. And so many planners are thinking, I never thought that
right.
exterior temperature could drive my water usage. And so there's that. You also have lavatories, kitchens, and hotel rooms, all of which you have very sort of minimal control.
Okay.
Good news is there's still things you can do, but it starts to reframe it that, well, maybe you can't just promise someone that you're going to reduce water by using less.
Right.
You're going to have to think differently.
Yeah, and I think venue selection is critical in that regard. And I'll back up just for a second and make a distinction. So I mentioned earlier that our critical mass is here in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is a little different than the rest of the country. We're water constrained, being in the desert,
right?
But we also have one of the most advanced water reclamation systems in the municipality in the world. And so any water that goes down a drain in Las Vegas is being treated and going back to Lake Mead.
Awesome.
And so we make a distinction between non-consumptive water use.
Okay.
Could be drink shower. Anything that's going down a drain. And consumptive water use. And our consumptive water use is primarily, as you said here, cooling towers for HVAC, our landscape irrigation, and evaporation from our pools and water features. And so the Southern Nevada Water Authority, who's our water utility here, that we're great partners, great partnership with them, very heavily focused on consumptive water use. And so that would be the cooling towers. And we've got ongoing pilots and optimization to try and still provide cooling, but do it in a more water efficient way, because that cooling tower water usage is our biggest consumptive water use.
Okay. Well, and I think that goes along with when you're thinking about, and I've read this, that cooling all the databases out there in the world, that takes up a lot of water. Like
data centers.
Energy
and water.
Right. Okay. Because we don't think about that, right? Necessarily, but they have to say
it's away. Somewhere else.
It's just somewhere else. Right. Exactly. Okay. So how, as a meeting planner, if I'm coming and if I'm going to come to MGM and I'm concerned about this, my company is concerned about this, what kind of information can you provide us on our consumption?
I would say if you're in the process of venue selection, to ask the venue about their water policies and their commitments and their goals and their targets. So here at MGM, we've had goals for a number of years. Our goal was to reduce our water usage on a square foot basis by 30%. By 2025.
Okay.
We achieved that early in 2019. And we reset that
6 years early.
Yeah, we reset that for a 33% reduction from a 2007 baseline. Additionally, earlier this year, our CEO endorsed the CEO water mandate.
Yeah.
So this is a not just for conference and convention business, but in the corporate world. This is a commitment that's run through the UN Global Compact and administered by the Pacific Institute. And it's basically a commitment to water stewardship leadership and advocacy beyond just direct operations. So we are the first Las Vegas-based company, first gaming company to endorse the CEO water mandate. So I think things like that, those types of commitments, we have a global water policy that's on our website, shows our company's commitment to these types of issues.
Okay. So, my next question, and then I'm going to tie that in there, but how many meeting planners are actually putting this in their RFPs and asking these questions? I mean, are you seeing it from people who've got ESGs from their corporation, or is this just a second thought? I mean, I know this is all your clients are asking that question because that's what you do, but are you getting this? Do you know if you're getting this question?
I think some of our larger customers are definitely very focused on sustainability and looking for this type of performance and beyond. And I think we're well positioned to try new things and pilot. I think we're in the process of making it more of a standard offering as it was. And the reality is if we have a conference and convention at one of our venues, whether they're interested in sustainability or not, they're getting the benefit of our water conservation programs or energy conservation programs.
Okay. And what are you seeing with it?
Yeah. Well, if your event is a corporate event, more and more we're seeing corporations bound to account for activations that are external to their home offices. So in our sustainability world, we often call that scope 3. That's sort of like that outside your direct ownership, but still connected. And what we're finding is that these large gatherings outside a company's home offices are substantial. And so they're requiring measurement and reporting. And that's why we're seeing a real drive for corporate events, but you're also seeing that there's all kinds of folks out there that are realizing this is the right thing to do.
Right.
So I've seen nothing but tremendous growth. I think MeetGreen calculated a 500% increase in carbon footprint requests. No, that's different than water.
Really? Yeah.
But since 2017. So
wow, that's huge. Yeah. Now, and I'm going to clarify a word in there: corporate versus association. I mean, are you seeing it more? Do you do a lot of association work, or is it more corporate?
We do some association work, and I would say that it's very strong there as well.
Really? Okay. All right. Awesome. So then the same kind of question, it's jumping back 2 questions, is how do you help planners, or how should planners be asking properties for this kind of information? Because there's some planners out there that are going to go to a property not to this caliber and say, okay, hey, I want to measure my sustainability. And they're like, what? What do you mean? And they haven't engaged maybe that person in the back of the house that has that role into this thing. Do you still see that, or does that make sense?
Yes. So like, what should planners be asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that question.
Yeah. I think starting with some really simple questions about like, what is your property doing regarding sustainability, and letting that property kind of run with that. And because I can kind of imagine what MGM might say in a question like that. You have your mega array and you have some really great things that you're doing. Another question might be, are you able to measure and report our environmental footprint? I think it's really telling those properties that can't, because you do have to draw some boundaries, and it takes somebody to own that. And a third, asking if they've achieved some sort of industry sustainability credential.
Okay.
So we do ask.
So like LEED certified or
Green Globes. Okay. There's the list goes on and on.
Okay.
And that's not the be all end all, but it shows that the property has had some level of third party vetting and met some baseline criteria.
Okay. And okay, so I want to go back to water. I mean, water bottles have been a huge discussion point for years. I know it's on one of your checklists, MeetGreen's checklist, and presetting water and iced tea. Right? I mean, I was telling you before we went live, I did an event in June in Palm Springs, and the property wanted to preset 700 glasses of water and 700 glasses of iced tea. And I'm like, don't. And is that going to make an impact by saying not do that?
I think in general, yes.
Okay.
Right? Again, in Las Vegas, there's a distinction that if it's going down a drain, it's not depleting the resource, but it still takes tremendous amount of energy to treat that water. So I think the short answer is yes, like big impact.
Especially with 700 people.
Yeah.
I mean, for 10 people, maybe not, but do you see a big impact? And I mean, you've done Oracle or which?
Yeah. I believe that it,
remember which clients you have.
I believe that it would. We talk about something at MeetGreen also called perception impact,
right?
Where it's tough to put a number to it. Mm-hmm. But I do think the big part of event sustainability is recognizing that there is perception impact, and what that says about, like, are you the kind of event that is okay with wasting resources? So there's that. But the numbers that you see from some of these decisions, like when you go into a room at MGM Resorts for a towel and linen reuse program, where you're reducing the load on washing machines, I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Well, and those signs in hotels have been there for a long time, right? But there's so many hotels that this housekeeping crew still takes your towels, even when you hang them up, still takes your towels and washes them. Is it finally getting, I mean, I'm sure in your hotels it has finally clicked and we're not doing that, but are we still having those problems?
Not at MGM Resorts. I feel like the resorts and hotels that I've worked with are honoring the doing what they say they're doing.
Right. And I mean, it's sometimes frustrating. And I'm like, don't even come into my room. I'm like, I don't change I use the same towel for a couple of days at home. Right.
Yeah.
I don't need my towel changed out every single day. And one of the things when you're looking at the UN's website about water, and I'll post their PDF on that, is ways that we can save water. So it's like buy sustainable fish, reduce your food waste, eat more fresh foods, follow a water-friendly diet. And I'm going to put this stat out here that says 95% of our food is produced on land and all begins with soil and water. And that the global water demand for agriculture expected to increase by 35% by 2050. So that's kind of those are both really staggering numbers. And I'm a huge proponent of regenerative agriculture, so that we're rebuilding the soil and things like that. But can you two tie in food production and water usage?
Yeah, I think it's still early days, in terms of having that information broadly available. And I think we're seeing the same thing around carbon. So you mentioned Scope 3 earlier, and So we're all, I think all of us in the hospitality world, but also in the corporate world, are beginning to ask our suppliers questions that they haven't been asked before, and ask for data that some of them are tracking and some of them are not. And
right.
So I think that the act of a company like MGM asking those questions of our suppliers, it will begin to move the needle in the right direction.
And I think at the high, well, yeah, because MGM is MGM. If you can help move us forward, maybe everybody else will follow. But what about food? I know here at IMEX, you're labeling food for water. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So as Michael said, it is kind of an emerging data set, but there is some academic research that we rely on. And so, it's looking at land use estimates for raising and producing a food item. And so similar to carbon, items like beef take a lot of resources to create. And so they are much more water intensive, they're also more carbon intensive than a plant-based item. And I just ran one stat through our model for if we're at IMEX America, for example, 4 days this week.
Okay.
If 14,000 people chose one plant-based meal, based on our model, we would save over 15 million liters of water, which is over 52,000 bathtubs of water.
Wow.
If the research is to be believed. But just imagine like all the water that it takes to raise a beef, for example.
Well, now, a couple of weeks ago, I had two ranchers on that are Will Harris is from White Oak Pastures, and he's probably the largest regenerative agriculture. So he would probably argue with a little bit about that, which and I'm good with, but that's also, he's working a soil, right? And doing things the right way, but I say the right way, doing things to save the soil and save the land. But he's one guy, right? One farm out there I think there's some. How do we pick food? I mean, we're talking about food and beverage, but how do the water that or the meal, I cannot talk. Oh my gosh. When we're choosing food, we're in Las Vegas. How much of your vegetables and stuff grow here? And where are you getting and there are no fish here. I would just, there's no ocean here.
There's freshwater.
There's, okay.
I mean, a lot of it's coming from California and from Arizona. I think a common misconception around in the carbon sphere is that the transportation is the majority of carbon in any kind of food. And so I think when you start to talk about impact of food, the first thing people think about, okay, I got to get local and that'll solve the problem. The transportation emissions on the carbon front is a relatively smaller percentage. And so it's really in the production. It's really in the production.
And that being said, so I will admit, when I first began this work, I also was thinking that it was all about hyper local. Right. And then I was like, when you factor the full life cycle in, maybe that's, so we still do believe in the value of regional. Right. I think what we're seeing in these kind of conversations that it is all connected. Right. And kind of what success looks like a little bit is making sure you're doing a variety of things. Okay. And benefiting the local economy has value. Yep. We do believe that we're trying to shorten supply chains. And this is outside of water a little bit, but for example, most of the owned items, and there are a ton of items that IMEX owns and just reuses year after year because the event is always here. And that's 5 miles away down the road. And so it's the shortest possible direct shipping. So anyway, trying to ensure that the bulk of our foods are not being flown in has that perception impact as well. Right. Yeah. And so you'll see we created some really great signage based on what the MGM F&B team shared with us of where they're sourcing, and you'll see some of these maps in the expo hall. A lot of it's the Central Valley of California. And so 500-mile radius for Las Vegas. If we were doing the event in a different city, different time of year, we would say 250 probably in terms of mileage, but we would draw a 500-mile radius.
I mean, if you were in what's the city that's smack dab in the middle of the United States? Like yeah. Like that might have a different scope to it, especially during the time of year. Right? If it's just in the middle of February, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends. I was at Purdue University before joining MGM, so I was in West Lafayette, Indiana, and it's very agricultural, the state of Indiana. And we did a study at one point and learned that at the time, the food economy in Indiana was $17 billion, and 96% was coming from out of state.
Wow.
So it was primarily corn and soy used for other purposes. So
not for consumption, aids in consumption.
You look at that and you think it's got to be all local.
Right.
Not so much.
Yeah, I went up to a wedding up outside of Chicago, and I was driving through these fields I stopped some lady at the stop sign. I'm like, "What is this?" And it's soy and corn, but that's for ethanol and feed, yeah, and not for human consumption. Okay, all right. So, what kind of things is MGM working on to help reduce the water? I mean, you signed that agreement. So what things can we see from all of your properties, and are all of them at the same level of this yet, or are they all working at their own pace to get there?
They're all working at their own pace, but they're all, I would say, fairly advanced. And when you look at our properties outside of Las Vegas, we're doing water collection, rainwater harvesting, with cisterns for toilet flushing or landscape irrigation. That doesn't make sense here in Las Vegas,
right? Except when it happened, it flooded.
Well, we do get during the monsoon season. Right. We get most of our rains in a couple of short bursts, and because the ground is so dry and the structure is what it is, we do have issues with flooding. But most of that water is making its way back to Lake Mead, so it probably would make sense for us to capture it. Anyway, but we're continuing to pilot new technologies around our cool towers to optimize and minimize the amount of water for cooling. Those types of things, adjusting the building management systems, they're invisible.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a challenge. I would say one that we've been doing quite a bit of and continue to do and is visible to the guest is we are converting what was water intensive landscapes to desert friendly, water smart landscapes. And so very much so back of house. So where it has very low or zero guest experience impact, we're converting, but even some of the guest facing landscapes are being converted.
And would that be why the fountains out front were not running?
I'm not sure why they're not running.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. So, and what are you seeing different properties do incorporating into water reduction?
Yeah. We're seeing high efficiency dishwashers, for example, going into the lavatories here. You're seeing low flush toilets, hand sensors.
The dishwashers are not going into the lavatory.
Yeah.
Okay. Dishwashing in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you're also, when you go
lavatory. Okay.
Thanks. So you see high efficiency fixtures.
Okay.
And so, I mean, just think of what that might save in terms of one use, but then you use that for 10 years every day.
Right.
And so the savings has got to be 50, 60, 70.
So what happens to all the stuff that we take out of the building? This is a completely tangent question. What happens to those toilets that we take out that are not water efficient?
They probably go to a landfill.
Well, I will say, just outside of water, so I'm staying at the Luxor here at IMAX, and I believe the Luxor has gotten some of its furnishings from the Bellagio. And so there's a line of succession. And so it's not just being tossed into a pit somewhere. It's being thoughtfully refreshed. And I do think it's at a larger level. That's what I'm seeing a lot in terms of expo design. In the end, many of these companies do not want to lose money. They have assets. They want to kind of keep them in circulation. And so I think we're trying to figure out in a way how to talk about reuse a little bit more. I know we're talking about water right now, but just as an aside for where I'm seeing shows like IMAX and its exhibitors going.
Okay, so trying to take that to a tangent of waste, right? And reclaiming and rescuing. Do you have numbers on water related to food rescue? Do you know of any of them?
Interesting. So like food being donated?
Yeah.
We'd have to take the dominant protein of that food and then look at its like embodied water content.
Right.
So I don't think of it in those ways. It's usually in terms of a weight.
Right.
For me, for the meal or the.
Right. But a lot of Aurora, who's here for a couple of days, she's like, a lot of people in the kitchens don't think about food as the weight of it, right? It's like how many pats of butter are left over, right? I mean, you think about it in what visually you see versus what's hidden, and how many people are actually weighing their food. But for statistics wise, it's good for the weight thing. But
in our industry, we tend to talk about a meal as being 1.2 pounds.
Oh, okay.
Of what?
Like some people eat more than that.
But a large portion of that is probably water content. We do see the waste numbers for these events. And I actually just looked at a pie chart from another event at Mandalay Bay Convention Center from another client. 49% of that was in the compost organics.
Okay.
This event was mostly on reusable serviceware. So it's all the wet waste of the food, and which MGM Resorts has some of the best outputs I've ever seen of a venue to ensure these aren't going to the landfill. But it's just, if you chop that 49% out, if they didn't have an organics program at this venue, the numbers would look so different because it's heavy. 64-gallon toter of coffee grounds, it's a couple 100 pounds.
Right.
Yeah, so we've been focused on food waste for a long time.
Okay.
We're the largest operator of non-chain restaurants in the world. So
wow.
We've got a lot of food waste. And that's both on the pre-consumer side, coming out of kitchens with the prep, but also post-consumer. And so we have three primary ways we can responsibly dispose of it, and maybe four. There's an EPA food waste hierarchy.
Okay.
And so the best thing is to not create the waste.
Right.
So it's reduction. But then after that, the best use is to feed humans.
Okay.
And so we've pioneered a program where we're taking, primarily in our conference and convention business, we're taking prepared foods that end up not getting served, right? If there's a dinner at a conference for 5,000, we have to be ready to serve 5,000 meals. And if only 3,500 people show up, there's a lot of really great food that could be going to landfill. And so what we do is if need be, we blast freeze that. We package it in disposable containers. We palletize it, we put it in our freezers, and then we work with a local not-for-profit that's actually distributing those meals to food banks and homeless shelters.
I was talking about that last week in Louisville for the La Dame's Day Escoffier conference. I'm like, because the food bank was there, I'm like, this is what MGM is doing. You need to follow them.
It's really a great program because it not only is it diverting food waste, but we also have a food donation goal that it's also addressing that. And so you mentioned weight. We do the conversion based on weight of this food. Right?
Okay.
You have a pallet of prepared meals. How do you decide how many meals that is? So that's a weight-based conversion. After humans, then we would want to feed animals. And so some of our food waste is going to feed pigs.
Okay.
There are a couple of...
and then the pigs are ones that we eat later?
I'm not sure if we're...
You actually do not eat them at this property.
Oh, okay.
So...
good question.
but we visited Las Vegas Livestock at IMX last year.
Okay.
Which is the old Combs, still the Combs family that runs this, but it's really great. If you have a chance to visit Las Vegas, consider scheduling a tour there.
What are the pigs' purpose for? Just to eat food?
They are essentially the EPA's third level on their hierarchy if you can't source reduce. And at IMX, by the way, we're cash concessions, so we're not firing up huge meals. It's kind of made order. So we have a low amount of waste. Donate to humans and then feed animals. These animals ultimately will be slaughtered.
Okay.
But
MGM.
But they're actually not being sold back to MGM. That was a little too circular for...
I was going to say, that's really circular.
I guess the fourth is composting. And so coffee grounds, for example, are going to Terra Firma Organics, which is actually sold as a soil amendment here in Las Vegas through Star Nursery. So this is going somewhere. It also means that stream needs to be really clean because their threshold for what they'll take is very narrow. But you'll see if you're at IMX, the new cups that are here, they have no wax on them. Leafware plates, so forth, can be rendered into soil. And then anything that is landfilled, which is actually on the same property as Las Vegas Livestock, owned by a different operator.
Okay.
There is a methane capture at this landfill.
Oh.
And so our goal is to have less than 10% of our waste by weight from IMX go to landfill, but that which does will ultimately be turned into.
And energy. Where are we now on that goal?
I believe we're about 93, 94%.
Okay.
It goes up and down a little bit each year. This is our largest IMX yet with our most exhibitors and most built hall. So I think things are looking good, but it always kind of goes a little bit up and down by
to that point regarding composting, it's easy to say we'd like to compost.
Right.
The devil's in the details in terms of the serviceware. Little details really matter. We were doing an event a couple of years ago and served a lunch in a box, and we worked really hard to make sure the box was compostable, but it needed to have a food label on it for food safety. And it turned out that the adhesive that was used to put the label on the box was not compostable. So these little details really matter.
Wow. I mean, we're going down to the adhesive, and is that like the adhesiveness on the apple that apparently you're allowed to eat?
No, I think it's different.
Okay.
But you'll see a sign there's a small grab and go, very small couple of refrigerators we're using bottle boxes. So it's a plastic box made of rPET, so recycled PET1 plastic. These were going to be compostable clamshells, but due to USD regulations, they needed to have an adhesive label. And we hemmed and hawed and tried. And in the end, the best, most recyclable choice then had to be plastic. And so that's why we're messaging that with the sign.
That it's made from recycled bottles.
And that it will be hand pulled out. I have pictures from last year too as well. But it's to what Michael's point is that we got so far down to the end. And then we were like, wait, we got to be able to compost this. And the compost won't take it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just mind-boggling. And the fact that we're digging down to the details all the way to the adhesiveness on a sticker, which is when I'm thinking of what goes at home, and we pull out the drawer, there's the trash can and those recycle on. My mom's like, the Dunkin' Donuts cup can't be recycled. It has to go in the regular one. I don't know if my Starbucks one is not, or I don't know, but and we were putting glass in ours, and our friends came up from Georgia, and they're like, "Oh, well, you can recycle glass." We're like, "Yeah, but some places aren't." So it's really kind of hard to do all of that. So kudos to the two of you.
We definitely recycle glass, but it is, I don't know if it's controversial, but from a embodied energy perspective, it's basically sand and it's inert. So if glass goes in a landfill, it's taking up space, but it's not off-gassing anything.
That's interesting. That's a cool little scientific fact to know.
Yeah. But when you're trying to manage, if you're tracking diversion rate, then you care about the weight of the material that you're diverting and glass. So if you're tracking a diversion rate, then you definitely want to be recycling glass. We do recycle glass, but we're using a waste intensity metric. So what we measure is the weight of the material that's going to landfill. Okay. And then we divide that by our total square footage. And so that's what we're tracking over time.
Okay.
It's interesting in the commodity market. So in the end, these items like aluminum and plastics are considered a commodity. They're bought.
Right.
And the prices fluctuate. But the last time I'd seen it, the price for glass was so low that it was actually cheaper to make virgin glass. I mean, this is not what you want to see from a thing in sustainability. It also shatters. And so people working in the waste industry are like, oh, there's these sharp shards everywhere. And so we have glass will be collected separately. You'll see some of these bins in food outlets at IMX. There's a robust collection from Restaurant Row and so forth. But it's a tricky item in F&B.
Yeah. If you go to a materials reclamation facility, a MRF, anywhere in the country, and you ask the operator what's the one material if you got your wish, you take out of the stream, it's glass.
Really?
It's for that purpose. If it shatters, and especially with paper, if the glass shards get in the paper fiber, and then you try to recycle that paper, it destroys the machines. So that's why separated paper is worth significantly more than commingled paper.
Wow. Oh my gosh, you guys are a wealth of knowledge. I mean, bringing this back to meeting planners, right? I mean, we have and I have this image of a plate and all these words that come down onto this plate of everything that they're responsible for, right? I mean, and I do food safety and I don't want anybody to kill from food allergies, etc. This is a lot to know. So are there some, especially around water, do you have 2 or 3 tips that you can say, what do you focus on first?
I focus on reusables.
Okay.
Got a stat or 2 here.
And reusables means China, just so everybody knows. Not recyclable or compostable equipment. China and glassware, silverware, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if there's one hill to make your stand in events, because you're just saving so much in terms of, we actually did a survey of 5 different venues and asked about breakage and different things. And a single fork is used about 2,500 times, and that's a conservative estimate of metal fork. So, but just looked last night on the internet, 1.4 gallons of water to make a plastic bottle. So that's not counting the water in the bottle.
Okay.
So, what's one of the reasons we try to reduce plastic bottles? You're saving water by in plastic when you're reducing carpet.
Okay.
I think 75% of the carpet in the world, or at least in the United States, is in Dalton, Georgia.
Yep.
I think there's a lake there. And so it's very water intensive to fabricate.
Okay.
If you have a digital app, like you're using the IMX digital app, you're not printing paper, super carbon intensive. IMX app, 14,000 people using it, saves about 2.7 million liters of water. It's about 9,000 bathtubs.
Wow.
So you're not going to see this on the statement that comes from your venue, but you're thinking that it's all related.
Well, just thinking, because you would think reducing paper, you're reducing the tree cutting down, but you don't think about the water that has to be used to make that paper. Interesting. Anything else?
I would just add to what we talked about earlier in venue selection to ask the right questions up front about water goals, water commitments. If you get the deer in headlights look, then they're probably not that far along the water conservation, water stewardship journey.
Right. Now, and do you see other brands stepping forward in this and signing that water goals? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're I think they range from the bigger hospitality brands to the boutique brands. A lot of this stuff is much easier to do with 100 key bed hotels set versus at scale.
Right.
So I think it's at both ends of the spectrum.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to look at my notes and see if there's anything else that I wanted to really ask you. Nobody's had any comments or questions, but water's scarce. I mean, is there a water scarcity problem here in Las Vegas? I mean, there is, but for consumption?
So that's a good question. I'll try to give you a brief answer.
Okay.
I think I moved here. I've been here a year. I moved here a year ago. And my perception coming to Las Vegas was we're going to run out of water. The sky is falling. And Las Vegas is the problem, right? And I think what I've learned since being here is that's not true. It's quite the opposite. Las Vegas has been planning for water scarce times for over 2 decades. So this water recycling system is an example of investment in infrastructure for this type of mega drought that we're in. We built the third straw, the so-called third straw, the third inlet in Lake Mead at a lower elevation. I think the reality is Las Vegas is going to be fine with water for a long time to come, but that doesn't mean we're slowing down in terms of our stewardship and conservation efforts. We're in this good place because of those efforts over time. So I think we're going to continue to work with our local partners, our local water utility, continue with conservation both on the non-consumptive side. So we talked about toilets, urinals, lavatories, kitchens, operations. Bring that water down. We're going to continue to reduce our consumptive use in our cooling towers and our landscape irrigation. And then the third pillar, I think, of that is in our supply chain. So where I would hope people planning events are going to the venues and asking the questions, we're asking those same questions to our supplier. What are your goals? What are your commitments? What are your targets? Hopefully we'll get to a point where we can ask that embodied water. What's the embodied water in this product or this commodity?
Meaning the water that's in that plastic bottle, not the water that's literally inside the bottle that's used to make the bottle.
Yeah. Okay. It's sort of like sustainability 3.0 or and I think we're trying to find, again, like an actionable course forward.
Okay.
There's a lot of theory and some of this, and even the numbers that we're working on here, we found a citation and we're kind of making a model off that.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, to think that meeting planners have the impact that the meetings industry has the impact that it does. I mean, I try to talk about the amount of food that we spend, right? That statistic that came out in 2016 was that meeting professionals in the U.S. spend $64 billion on food and beverage, just in the U.S. And to be honest with you, I think everybody outside of our industry doesn't even know what we do. So the fact that you're doing the things that you're doing, but we have we can make a huge impact. All right, you turned over your notes. You have another thing you wanted to say.
Oh, no, I was just refreshing my mind of some of the topics that you mentioned.
Yeah. All right, what did I miss? Anything that we need to talk about?
Oh, you talk a lot about equity in some of your questions. And I don't know, is there anything you want to say about?
I mean, that's kind of like that scarcity thing, making sure that, because even though UN's thing is like, leave no one behind. And making sure that everybody's got the water, because we all need water. We can go a few days without food, right? But we all need water. We as humans need water, right, to survive. But how do we make it water equitable across the globe, across the United States? And I remember when I lived in Georgia, and I'm going to say it here too, is like Lake Mead is used to water things in California and not just here. But in Georgia, I think it was North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia were all fighting for water. like that was like a decade or 15 years ago, but how do we make it equitable? Do you have an answer for that, Eric?
I sure don't have the silver bullet answer.
Okay. All right. You would be really rich if you did.
Yeah. Where I often asked, and it's like, you're left with the best of 4 choices.
Right.
Frequently in sustainability, I feel that the old physics adage where matter can never be created or destroyed, it can only change shape. Like you can never just like stop something from having an impact.
Right.
We, for example, move the water that is the bottled water that's sourced by this property, Mandalay Bay, is now crowdsourced.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's
in the cans, right?
Yeah. And so that's southern Idaho. And so we felt like that was a win talking with years ago, talking with the team here. It was more of a regional product. It still falls in our 500-mile radius. Is that drawing the water table down in Idaho somewhere? But we feel like it was a better choice for us to cut down on shipping. It's also in a 100% aluminum bottle with a cap, which is easy to get out of a waste stream. It's a non-ferrous metal. So it can be repelled out of the waste. So yeah, I think what we're trying to do is realize that it's all connected and look at it from a lot of different lenses. One of the lenses that we look at projects through at MeetGreen, we have what's called 10 social equity minimums. We try and get 5 in every project. But one of those, for example, is like, have we looked at if we have the ability to source products, can we look at, is it a small business, woman-owned business, veteran-owned business? Is it meeting some kind of criteria on that front? Making sure that we're getting data and metrics from the dietary needs, for example. And so we're going down that list. And so nothing's perfect, but we're looking at what we're doing from a lot of different lenses and trying to make the best of bad choices.
Using puzzle. It's a puzzle. Yeah.
And so I wish, again, we had the silver bullet, but in lieu of having that,
the Staples button that we're Okay. All right. What about?
Yeah. So I think specifically looking at the Colorado River Basin, we've got the upper basin states and lower basin states, and we've kind of come up with an agreement with the federal government to buy some time out to about 2026 to renegotiate the operating terms of the river. And so we're going to have to come up with an agreement with a solution that works for everyone. I think for us, not using the water that we don't need to use, by conserving, is the right thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do. It's leaving more of that resource for others to use. So I think that's in direct operations. And as we're kind of contemplating our water stewardship journey, we're starting to think about how could we make an impact beyond direct operations. And so I don't really have anything to report on yet. I think it's still early days in terms of figuring out what that is. But if you look around and check out the news or LinkedIn sustainability, there's lots of great stories of big corporations having an impact beyond their direct operations around water, whether that's availability or quality or even stormwater. Planting trees after a wildfire has major water implications.
Tracy, I mean, Michael said, it reminded me of something that's important for meeting planners to know, is there is something called a water restoration credit. Kind of like a carbon offset. Or a renewable energy certificate. Like you are supporting, it'd be financially supporting projects that are verified to have restored ecosystems or water around various projects around the world. And so we have done that at MeetGreen, and for a while there was a feeling in the meetings industry that maybe water restoration credits was going to be the new way forward. I would say it's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit mentally. Offsets have some pros and cons for carbon, but I just wanted to let folks know that if you are passionate about that, it's a tool in your toolbox. It's certainly not something that you want to just water restore your way out of high consumption. But it's just something to be aware of, depending on what your team's goal is and what you're doing around water.
And with all of this being said, I mean, it's little tiny steps, right? And I mean, I know Dale talked about this last year with IMAX. It's like, it's just start with, these are our goals for this year. Let's accomplish these. And then let's go to the next level of goals and accomplish these. You can't do it all at one time. You would go crazier than you already are as a meeting professional. I mean, but tiny little steps make a difference. One little drop of water makes a difference, right?
It's incremental. Incremental change
All right. So my last question, I know I've asked you this question like 4 times already because you've been on the show that many times. Safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage food system mean to you?
I would say it's probably regenerative in the sense that the systems that produce that food are left ideally in a better state than before you started. And I think that's a virtuous cycle, not just on the environmental aspect, but also the social aspect as well.
I like that. You have another answer after 4 times.
Yeah, it's funny that it feels like the first time. Similar to Michael's description of regenerative, I think having an integration in terms of an integrated view of food and beverage. I think maybe years before we were a little more linear. And so there's one thing that I hope that we've impressed upon everybody on this last hour is like things that you're doing with carpet might impact your water consumption at a high level. And so thinking about your food and beverage in kind of the broadest way possible, and then bringing it back to an actual BEO. But really expanding that definition, getting stakeholder feedback, and kind of rethinking, which is the first R and R, like we rethink, we reuse, we recycle. Sure. So giving your F&B that latitude, I think, is key. And what we found at MeetGreen is that folks love to do this. Everyone loves to talk about food.
Well, everybody has to eat. Everybody likes to talk about it. But to me, the biggest challenge is that it's the thing that we focus the least amount of time on our budget. We spend the most on it, but it's the thing that we think about at the last minute because we don't have to give the menus until a week out or whatever, but that's got to change.
Yeah, I think from a systems perspective, it's the whole food and beverage industry is evolving and hopefully the pace is accelerating. It's asking those questions and it's getting the data. And so we want it to be delicious. We want it to be healthy. We want it to be high quality. Obviously, from an operations perspective, cost for us is a concern. And then there's all of the environmental and social dimensions of these decisions we're making. And so I think we need that. We need some great examples, some great case studies of solutions that kind of check maybe not all the boxes, but most of the boxes. And they're beginning to emerge. But I think if we do this again in 2 or 3 years, maybe we'll have better examples. Yeah, I think that those examples are emerging.
And just listening to it made me think too and Eric, from your perspective as well, and this will be the last question. How is your staff in the kitchens and how the chefs that you work with when you're working with your clients, how have not necessarily the executive chefs, but executive chefs down to the dishwashers and even the servers, how have they embraced this, or have you given them, I'm hoping you've empowered them to be part of this whole solution? Absolutely.
And our staff are the best in the world.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a value for the company. And I think it gets down to training, and it's not something you fix once and then forget about it. Or if you do, you've got problems down the road. It's ongoing, continual. And I think like a lot of people, we have some recovery still from the pandemic in terms of our operations. And I think about waste. There's some things we're taking a really sharp look at in the kitchens that in some places we're doing really well, other places maybe not as much. And so trying to standardize those procedures and develop training materials. But I think a lot of this, when you're thinking about waste, it's easier to address it in the kitchen than it is at the dock.
Right.
We're addressing it at the dock, but it's cleaner, it's easier, it's simpler to do it in the kitchen.
And any pushback or chefs that you've said like are really empowered by this?
Well,
besides the ones at MGM.
Well, I will say that I frequently am in meetings, and I believe that food and beverage is the crossroads of sustainability for the event. I mean, it's your pipeline to procurement. I've never had so many procurement conversations that I've had in F&B, including those cups that are now here. I would say, especially at MGM, I have to give a little shout out. We do a lot of work at multiple properties, and the food and beverage teams sit on our sustainability calls.
Oh, awesome.
Sometimes the chef, sometimes director of catering and things like that. But during the show, it is our waste. That's the waste stream. And just, we've had nothing but positivity. I mean, I've done events in Houston, Texas, and other places. We do IMEX Frankfurt. The Ascente team from Messe Frankfurt sit on the sustainability call.
Okay.
And I think what I'm finding is that teams understand that. They're not like, why am I here? They see how the role that they play. And basically the lead recycler at Mandalay Bay is Chef Russ. So that's just due to the passion, the connection between what Michael was talking about, that so much is coming at the source here.
Right.
Let's address it there.
It makes me think that these people that are behind the scenes doing all this work for us, they get to geek out in a whole nother way and show people what they're so excited about in their daily jobs that they never got asked about before, right? It gives them so much more joy and empowerment, I think.
Yeah. And I would say to maybe challenge the planners to what you said about the menus coming last, and maybe it's the thing you spend the most on, but the least time. When we look at events from an operations perspective, there's the energy and the water, which we talked quite a bit about, and that's really about venue selection. But in terms of what the event, the producer, promoter of the event, with the decisions they can make, a lot of that is around food and beverage. Right? If they have an exhibit hall, then there could be a tremendous amount of materials and waste there as well. But so I would challenge you to bring that in your checklist and timeline of planning. Bring that earlier in the conversation. Sometimes we get asked, and again, it's the selections, and then at the end, it's the waste. Sometimes we get asked very late in the planning process, we want to do a zero waste event. That's not the best way to do it. So you want to be thinking about these decisions, whether it's on the sourcing side, the water conservation and food side, or the waste side, very early in the process.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Thank you.
And by the way, we're in the wedding chapel, if you can't tell. You can't tell. But yeah, we're at MGM. We're here for IMEX. Where's your little badge? Just says IMEX. Yep. No, we're backwards. Yep. Yeah. Anyway, so we're here for IMEX. So Michael Gulich, I said that right, and Eric Wallinger, thank you both so much for spending time with me today. And everybody, I'm on live tomorrow with Victoria, who is the Vice President of Convention Services and Catering for MGM. So we're going to be talking about CSMs and meeting planners and how we can work together. And then Wednesday, we're talking about food allergies. And Thursday, it's up in the air right now, but we're going to be here. So 4 days straight. And if you're at IMEX, find me. Okay. And, actually, wait, 3 comments here. Let's see what these 3 comments are. Deer in headlights look was mentioned. I expect that questions about water conservation, in-depth questions will be met with those looks if you're not in Las Vegas. Possibly. Eye-opening, as I think many of us in the conservation efforts on-site not extended, such as the water used for crop shielding the fruit vegetable. We don't think about that. And then side question for Eric, is that kosher with MGM on your panel? I'm not sure what that means, but because he's working with MGM on my panel? All right, well, I'm not sure, but thank you. We'll figure that out and we'll get back to you on that. Did I miss an opportunity in Portland? Do clients know you through OCC? No.
That's Oregon Convention Center.
Okay.
But MeetGreen corporate office is based in Portland.
Yep. So reach out to Eric on LinkedIn and you can work with him at the Portland Convention Center. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Or Oregon Convention Center. That's the OCC. Thank you very much for tuning in. And until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.